Let's make some waves. Welcome to another episode of TheGameSmith, and in today's episode we're going to be making small and medium-sized tidal waves for our modular water tiles. Although I guess small and medium is relative to the miniatures you put beside them. In any case, let's head to the table. To start, we're going to be using some clear plastic as the base for our small waves. This vegetable container has a lot of usable flat surfaces in it. However, the plastic is quite flimsy and I'll use this on a different project. I have this plastic lid that is much more sturdy and also has a large flat surface area. Next, we're going to use some of our inexpensive kitchen and bath adhesive caulking. The caulking has a great working time and dries quite quickly. Next, we're going to need a round tool such as a straw or a wood dowel. You can also use a pen, a pencil, or a highlighter. The size is up to you, but I suggest staying away from anything that is larger than a ½ inch or about 1 centimeter in diameter. To begin, we cut our plastic container into usable flat sheets, and then into strips that are 2½ to 4 centimeters or about 1 inch to 1.5 inches wide, and about 11 centimeters to 4 inches long. The exact size is up to you, but I found that these dimensions work the best for me. Tiles that are too small are easier to damage and lose, and the very large tiles can be problematic in order to store and transport. After cutting, we're left with these clear plastic rectangles that we'll use as the base for our waves. So you can see what I'm doing much easier, I'm going to use this sheet of construction paper under the base. Next, using some tape, I'll attach this rectangle to the construction paper in order to hold it in place. When we decide on the placement of our wave, we place our straw or dowel on that location. Next, we take our kitchen and bathroom caulking and squeeze out a healthy amount pressed against the straw. We want the caulking to squish under the round edge of the straw in the direction that we want our waves to flow. Now, depending on the brand of caulking that you're using, I suggest you wait a few minutes and let it adhere to the surfaces. When you're ready, gently lift the straw or dowel upwards while simultaneously curling the dowel away from the exposed caulking. You should see the caulking rise, stretch, and curl over when you pull the dowel away. The result should be a frothy white curling wave. Next, you can use the same caulking on the dowel in order to create another wave on the same base. You may want to add more caulking to thicken up your wave. You repeat these steps as many times as you see fit in order to create your small wave tiles. You may find that you need to practice this a few times depending on the thickness of the caulking brand that you're using. Mistakes are easy to deal with and cleanup is quite easy while the caulking is still wet. A clean tissue or napkin will easily clear away the caulking from your straw or dowel. With a close-up view, you can see how our curving waves are made by this technique. If you're unhappy how a wave turned out, simply add more caulking and reshape your wave. After the caulking is dried, you can easily remove any flakes or shapes or excess caulking with a hobby knife. You can simply scratch away the caulking you don't want to remain on the base. The results are these knee-high or waist-high tidal waves that we can place on our beach tiles that we made in episode 2 of the Water Terrain series. I also want to mention that different caulking products will produce different results. Also, how long you let the caulking cure before actually trying to create your waves changes the results. These waves were shaped after I let the caulking sit for about 5 minutes before I shaped them. In contrast, these blobs of flat mass didn't hold the shape that I made for them. They lost the curling ridges of the wave shape that I wanted. Fortunately, the dried caulking is easy to remove from the clear plastic base. You should be able to simply remove the waves you don't want and try again. Next, we're going to be working on our medium-sized tiles, and this build is going to be more closely related to the tools and techniques and materials that we've been using with our other water terrain tiles. For our medium waves, we're going to need light blue and dark blue tissue paper. We're also going to need some craft sticks that are about 15 millimeters or ½ an inch across and 15 centimeters or 6 inches long. We're also going to need a plastic tube of some kind. I like these tubes because they come in several colors and they easily hold a set of polyhedral dice. We're also going to need some spray-on sunscreen. That's right, sunscreen. You can use lotion if you don't have any spray, but I find the spray makes less mess than the lotion does. The SPF doesn't really matter, and you can even use old expired sunscreen. Just make sure to shake the bottle up before you use it. To build our medium waves, we'll need to take our colored tissue and cut it into strips that's about 5 inches or 13 centimeters across. We'll also want the length to be about 20 inches or 50 centimeters. We'll also need our water PVA mixture that we've been using throughout the water terrain series. This is about a 60-40 PVA to water mixture. We discussed this in further detail in episode 1. We coat one side of the tissue with the PVA mixture. A gentle layer across half the length is all we want. Then we fold the tissue over on itself and press the layers together. We then repeat the process for the light blue tissue. Don't worry about any minor tears in the tissue. Next, we add another thin layer of glue to one of the double tissue layers and affix the two sheets together. The layers don't have to match up perfectly. Now we take our tube, in this case a plastic candy tube, and spray it with the sunscreen. Make sure to cover the length of the tube and its circumference with the sunscreen. We then wrap the still wet tissue paper around the tube. Make sure that the light blue tissue is on the outside when wrapping the tube. If you need to add a little extra glue to secure the outside edge, go ahead and do that. We can also add a few wrinkles to the outside layer in order to add texture to the tissue. We want to let this dry for about 20 minutes so that the outside tissue is about 80% dry. After a few minutes under a fan, we're ready to take a look at our tube. The outside tissue is mostly dry, but not quite rigid, but it's enough to hold the wrinkled texture that we added earlier. Now we should be able to slide the tissue off the candy tube because the oils in the sunscreen prevent the glue from bonding the tissue to the tube. Next, we look for the seam that we left behind and cut on the opposite side so that the final fold is on the bottom of our tube as we cut it in half. Now we add some of our PVA mixture and place our craft stick lengthways across the middle. Next, we fold our tissue up and together to create a wave-like shape with the craft stick acting as the base. We can shape the tissue with a curling slope so that it looks like a cresting tidal wave. This should be easy to achieve since the outside layer of the tissue is mostly dry, and it will return to that tube-like shape even though we temporarily flattened the tissue out. We then let our wave dry a few hours. Of course, you can accelerate the dry time by using a fan. Now that our tidal wave is completely dry, we can see that the rigid curve of our tissue looks like a cresting tidal wave. Next, we want to remove the excess base from our wave. We can deal with the gaps on the ends in just a minute. Next, we want to shape the crest of our tidal wave just a little bit. With a pair of scissors, we can round the edges and put a few curves in the crest. Next, we start our dry brushing with white acrylic paint. We want a clean brush with a wide flat toe. Then, just like we painted our water features in the other water videos, we want very little paint on our brush. We want to capture only the raised high points on our wave textures with our paint. Remember, we want very little paint and very little pressure so we don't get the paint between our textured ridges. Don't worry about the leading edge of our cresting wave, we'll deal with that in just a minute. Next, I want to seal these gaps at the ends of our wave. I'm going to do that with hot glue in order to save time. I'm putting a craft stick on one side of the wave so I can press the glued tissue together. I don't want my fingers anywhere near that hot glue because it's several hundred degrees. Next, we go to our kitchen and bath caulking in order to add whitecaps to our waves. We add a layer of caulking to the leading edge of our cresting wave, and with a stir stick we can dab the caulking and gently pull it away from our build. The result should be a frothy wave that appears to be curling over on itself. You can add as much or as little caulking as you want to enhance the appearance of your wave. Here are the final results for our small and medium waves that we can add to our water tiles. I suggest you make at least half a dozen of these waves in order to use them with your other water tiles. With these techniques, you can create all manner of watery effects for your water tiles. You can use these waves to show the tide is coming in, or approaching inclement weather, or even use them as spell effects for your game table. I hope you experiment with these techniques and share the results with the community on our Facebook, Instagram, or Pinterest pages. If you like what we're doing here at The GameSmith and you'd like to support us, please subscribe and post a comment or hit that thumbs up button and check out our website at TheGameSmith.org. For our next video, we're making much larger waves, the kind that will strike terror into even the most seasoned sailors. Until next time, I'll see you at the table.